I want to thank this entire Brooklyn Law School staff. They are phenomenal. First, I want to thank Michael LeCarre and his team. He's the point person here on the ground and all of his people. But the most important person here is the dean himself, Dean David Meyer, who, by the way, in this 124-year-old school, he is a renowned constitutional law scholar. He also served as a law clerk on the Supreme Court. He's got a resume that really would probably go up that carpet to the back. He leads a phenomenal team. We're so grateful for this space, and also to the fact that we're so proud to have a law school that even people in Manhattan say, what do you think? Yeah, I think we should go to Brooklyn Law School. Yeah, good idea. Ladies and gentlemen, David Meyer to say hello.
Thank you so much, Karen. Maybe the only truth in that is that what a great team we have, that it truly is. But I'm pleased just to have the opportunity to say thank you to all of you for being here, and welcome to Brooklyn Law School. And this is home turf to the IND to come here for the monthly meetings are often held here, and so we're pleased to welcome you back. And we have a lot of pride, sense of identity at Brooklyn Law School in our connection with public service. Many of our students are here and have their eyes set on careers in public service, and so the opportunity to join in providing a venue for this important forum is something that we're honored to be able to join in doing. So thank you so much for being here and for giving me a chance to say welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Just a side note, I know we're supposed to be streaming to YouTube as well, but there seems to be some technical difficulties. So, see, this is why we have Tony. He's phenomenal. Give it up for Tony. Okay, so now with all of that out of the way, I'd like to call up Allison Mingus to help join me with getting things started.
Hello, I'm Allison Mingus, representing BKForge. We would like to invite Senator Jessica Ramos up here. She was elected to the state Senate in 2019 to represent District 13 in Queens, and she currently serves as chair of the Senate Labor Committee. Hello. We'll have you.
Well, let me get the bottle of water before I start.
Being good Democrats, we're conserving.
All right, so we are going to start by asking you a series of questions after your introduction. So we'll turn it over to you for your intro, and then we'll get started with questions. Okay. And our timekeeper is right up there, Boomer in the green sweatshirt.
Hello? Is this thing on? All right, now it is. Hi, good evening, everyone. Buenas noches. My name is Jessica Ramos. I, first and foremost, am the mother to two wonderful boys who are in 6th and 8th grade. I am a product of New York City public schools, proud public school mom. And yes, I work as a senator for the past 6 years as chair of the Labor Committee. I come from labor. I worked for many unions over my career, and I actually was a member of the de Blasio administration. I was part of the team that delivered on universal pre-K for New York City parents. And all of that is a big reason why I am so invested in the future of our city. I know that we can do better than how we've been doing these past few years, making sure that we're working for a city that really is inclusive of everyone who's trying to make it in New York. I'm the proud daughter of immigrants from Colombia. My mom crossed the Mexican border to get here, like many people are still doing today, 40 years later. And it's all about affordability, I think, the conversations that we've been having. So a lot of the work that I've been doing in the Senate by raising the minimum wage, by expanding eligibility for childcare, are a lot of the things that I want to continue to work on as your mayor. I've already put out my universal child care plan. I am also campaigning on a youth jobs guarantee to make SYEP year round and help our young people stay off the street and get their foot in the door, exploring careers that they may or may not like, but giving them enough time to even hopefully get an early start on their Social Security investments. And then I want to take care of our mental health issues. And I think all of us have had a rough time throughout COVID, but there are people who are especially struggling in our city and finding refuge on the subway. This is about finding the compassion to give them the services that they need, correcting the wrongs that Andrew Cuomo did in closing down those mental health institutions, refurbishing them, restaffing them, resourcing them to make sure we're keeping everybody safe the right way. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you. So now we'll move on to the questions. And then just so you know, the last 3 minutes of your time, and you see the 3 minutes remaining, we're going to move into a lightning round.
Jackie or Boomer?
Or Boomer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
So the last 3 minutes lightning round, and first we'll do longer questions. All
essay
right.
form.
Yes. Please describe a specific plan to increase housing supply and protect tenants from eviction, including how you will work with the governor and state legislator to accomplish these goals.
Well, thank you for the question. First, let me shout out my colleague here, Assemblywoman Joanne Simon, who actually works with me on a bill to help precisely a lot of our public defenders, many of whom are graduates here at Brooklyn Law School. We have a bill in order to provide some student loan forgiveness to those who have chosen a career in public interest law, which is really important. And that is relevant to the question because I want to be able to expand a lot of the tenant supports that we do have that have been under-resourced. We want to support tenants. We want to support homeowners who have experienced things like deed theft, who have experienced a lot of foreclosure challenges. And those are not supports that City Hall is offering right now. We also need an accountability system for bad, greedy landlords. Right now in my district, we're having a lot of issues with landlords who aren't providing heat, who aren't providing hot water, despite making millions of dollars every year. In the state legislature, back in 2019, we were able to actually champion a lot of tenant protections, especially for rent stabilized tenants like myself. I've been living in a rent stabilized apartment for the past 13 years. It carried me through divorce. It's really hard to be able to make it in New York. And that's why we have to make sure that there is a housing stock that really takes every single type of New Yorker into account. So at City Hall, making sure that we have a real tenant support unit.
We reach you home.
Sounds like a sweet little
Thanks
girl.
for giving me a ride.
We're going to pause it until we get some.
She might be concerned about rent issues.
We're just going to pause the time for a second while we try to make sure that Zoom is under control. It's good. Okay, we're cool then.
That's okay. I mean, but you get the gist. We want to make sure that we have a City Hall that has a tenant support unit, that we're thinking through fully funding all of the public defenders that renters need in order to go into court when there are greedy landlords abusing the law in order to push them out. This is about really stemming gentrification. I mean, my family got pushed out of Astoria back when I was 16 years old, and we want to make New York City affordable for everyone. So making sure that those City Hall supports are there is going to be critical.
Thank you. Our next question, in light of the incoming federal administration's threats, what will you do to protect our immigrant neighbors?
Thank you. That's something I know a lot about right now in my district, where we've seen a lot of the migrants flock to corridors like Roosevelt Avenue because so many of them are South American like me. So of course they look for their type of community. actually my streets have been quite empty, and not just because it's really, really cold, although I'm sure that contributes to the issue, but because they're scared that there are going to be ICE raids. And actually, I had one of my staff members' brothers be stopped by ICE in the Bronx earlier this week, was told that he should be carrying his work permit with him in order to make sure that he has the proper documentation to show in case he's stopped again. And this is something that really threatens our economy. It threatens the safety of migrant families, of course, even though I don't really know when we made the jump from immigrant to migrant, but making sure that we're protecting our immigrant families. We don't want family separation, which leads to the need of so many other services, particularly if there are children involved. This is why we are a sanctuary city for a reason. And we want to be able to protect all of the immigrants who are here, working, contributing, and making sure that they are making New York a better place. The history of immigration is the history of New York City. And we really have to stop scapegoating immigrants, especially in the case of this current mayor who has been vilifying them in order to hide his mismanagement of funds and no bid contracts that have gone to his cronies. Thank you.
And next, corruption and impunity have long plagued the NYPD. Specifically, how will you reform or constrain the NYPD to promote accountability to the public, discourage the overuse of force, and ensure the department's compliance with the city's local laws?
I am both someone who was stopped and frisked in my youth when I was 19 years old. I am also someone who has benefited from a neighbor calling 911 when my former partner was hurting me. And so I have been able to see both sides of the coin. I want laws to be enforced because, or else laws don't matter. I mean, they have to mean something. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we're holding those who believe they're above the law accountable. I think first and foremost, we have to turn those police scanners back on. Our press and everybody else should be able to know exactly what type of police activity is taking place. We want to make sure that we're fully staffing the CCRB, which is the Civilian Complaint Review Board. When police overstep their bounds, there has to be a place where New Yorkers can go to report the wrongdoing and know that those reports are going to be taken seriously. And those police officers who have lots of complaints against them need to be held accountable for their behavior. So if it's called for them to be fired, they need to be fired. Not everybody who wants to be a police officer is meant to be a police officer. And just because you carry a badge doesn't mean that you can walk around using your power and perhaps even your gun or excessive force with impunity. So there is a message to send there. And of course, in making sure that we are thinking through how we replace a lot of the emergency response systems that they currently participate in. Like, for example, when New Yorkers call because there's a mental health episode happening, this is why I actually want to help take a lot of the money that we've been using for robocops and drones and all of these technological toys that actually have not been working and don't replace a human being. I want to use that money to be able to upskill EMS and EMT workers who should be the ones, along with clinicians, responding to mental health emergencies. We have to start taking that seriously. That's taking public health seriously.
What can the city do to increase access to reproductive health care, including abortion, and improve maternal health outcomes?
You know, we've done so much to protect a woman's right to choose. And unfortunately, we know that with the incoming administration, a lot of this may or may not be challenged. I mean, you know, the incoming president says a lot of things. Half of them are true. Sometimes he means something else. He's very unpredictable, and he is surrounding himself with a slew of his own set of cronies that are really putting us on the path to an oligarchy. President Biden said it last night, and I agree with him. And that is exactly what we have to stand up against. So we want to make sure that New York is continuing to service women who are coming to New York, but we also have to take care of New York City women. This is why I want to be able to secure the funding for doulas, secure the funding for many other supports that women need when they do choose to keep their pregnancy. I say that as the daughter of a mom who had a lot of trouble delivering me and actually died for 3 minutes clinically while giving birth to my little sister at Elmhurst Hospital in Queens. That is just the reality of the maternal experience for many women of color, particularly Black and Indigenous women. And our taxpayer dollars should be supporting us and our families. So there is a lot to talk about in more than 3 minutes when it comes to a vision for hospitals and, of course, with reproductive rights. One of the things that I am concerned about when it comes to women who come from outside of New York seeking refuge and medical services is protecting their private information. Right now, we do not have laws in place to make sure that insurance companies are not sharing their information with their home governments and their home state, and that can put them in jeopardy. Well, here in New York, we believe in safeguarding everybody's health, and I want to do my part as mayor of this city to make sure that, well, especially as the only woman in this race, we are protecting the women in this city in every sense of the word.
Assuming continued mayoral control of the New York City public school system, what initiatives would you pursue to improve the quality of education for all public school students in the city?
That's also not a 3-minute answer, but I will try. Look, I mean, I've long thought that our diversity is our strength, and yet we have not been able to capitalize on our cultural competency. To be honest, I'm a big believer that New Yorkers should speak more than one language. We are now competing globally, and there is a lot that we can do in order to invest in our youngest New Yorkers. I want to really expand dual language services and make sure that we have vocational opportunities at the middle school and high school level for our young people. Some people go on to college, other people are not meant to have that path. There should be no excuse as to the economic opportunity that is available for young people, and this is why I've announced my promise to deliver on a youth jobs guarantee in order to make sure that no matter what you feel your talent or what your interests are, what you want to pursue, that you have the opportunity to do so in a way that allows you to contribute to your well-being and to your families. But I will say that I'm not a big fan of mayoral control. And though I'm a big proponent of, well, if you're going to oppose, you have to propose, right? Oppose and propose. I would like to have the opportunity to work with educators, with parents, and with the students themselves to really bake out a plan where our parents, our faculty, and our students have much more of a binding say in what goes on in our classrooms, and especially when it comes to our curriculum. A lot more needs to be done to make sure that our textbooks look like you, look like me, so that we know that we have had an active and important part in the history of New York and the United States. And I want to make sure that there is real financial literacy as part of our education system. There's a lot of life skills. Every single New Yorker should know how to swim. Every single New Yorker should know how to balance their checkbook. Those of us who have grown up with parents who were working poor, were not necessarily taught a lot of the lessons that rich people have been able to pass on to their children. So knowing how to read your W-2 and perhaps even know how to file your own taxes is something that every single New Yorker should be able to do.
Yeah. What are your plans to improve transportation to enhance safety, accessibility, and quality of the city's streets for all New Yorkers?
Well, we talked about safety a little bit. So I put out a mental health plan called Harmony NYC, which is all about making sure that our emergency response systems are humane and that we are first and foremost creating a pipeline to build the mental health workforce that we need. A big challenge that we have in New York City is that we've ignored the care economy that our needs demand. So making sure that we actually have people in the pipeline learning and training to be psychologists, social workers, behavioral therapists, and everyone in between is really important. I believe that we need to work very hard in order to get people, especially those who are struggling with severe mental illness, the help they need. Some of them sometimes don't even understand that they're going through those hardships. And so I would, in addition, like to make sure that there are services available from homeless services, from social services department at every single one of our major subway stations. You know, a lot of our subway stations, and I think this is true of here in Brooklyn too, but over on 74th Street and Roosevelt Avenue, where I come from, we have a ton of vacant retail space. And those are spaces where there can be a city desk where New Yorkers can not only come and one-stop shop for services, but it's also the folks who should know who the regular people frequenting the station with mental health challenges are. And so that way we can be much more proactive and have government on the street, meeting people where they are. The other thing is picking up where this current mayor has failed, and that is in actually building out the bus lanes and the streetscapes that we need to have reliable bus service. I cannot tell you how life-changing that has been for us on Northern Boulevard in Queens. I know there are challenges on Fordham Road in the Bronx. I'm sure there are places here in Brooklyn too, where it just makes sense for us to carve the space in order to make our buses more efficient and therefore encourage more people to perhaps leave their car at home and hop on the bus, because you're just going to get there a lot faster. You're going to be on that bus and you're going to wave by everybody who's stuck in traffic. I love doing that on the Q53. It's true. There is a lot of cooperation to be done with the governor, of course, who's in charge of the MTA. If I had to say, I think the mayor of the city of New York should be able to appoint the president of New York City Transit. I don't know why we're not able to do that, given that it's the person who really thinks about our city transit holistically. So we should have much more of a say, in my opinion. But I have had a good experience working with Governor Hochul to be able to hopefully build on this incoming capital plan. I've been a member of both the Transportation Committee and the Corporations and Authorities Committee, which oversees the MTA. My only big ask and major thing that I want to champion is data transparency. You know, it's hard to champion and root for the MTA and try to raise money for it when, of course, and rightfully so many question where the money actually goes. It's like a bottomless pit, right? I mean, we've seen chronic disinvestment for the past, I don't know how many decades, my entire lifetime. There are the far corners of Brooklyn and Queens that still need train service. So I'm really excited about the IBX, because it's going to connect Jackson Heights to Bay Ridge. I've already said it in an interview. It's going to be the most delicious train line you've ever heard of, or you've ever tasted, I should say. But we need a lot more of that. We need to be able to to connect our communities and really admit that we've decentralized Manhattan as part of our economy.
All right. If elected mayor, how would you protect the city against a likely hostile federal administration while delivering results for New Yorkers?
You know, it's an interesting thing to be in politics, because many times I've noticed with colleagues, if you disagree with them on issues, they can take it really, really personally. As if you're attacking them as a person, when more often than not, it's just, I disagree with you on the issue, or my neighbors in my district have a different experience, you know, and we're doing our best to advocate for our constituents. Well, here, my constituency would be all of New York City. So making sure that we are picking fights where we need to, right? So if President Trump comes and starts attacking a woman's right to choose, for example, or immigrants or the LGBTQ community, right? Because right now we're in desperate need for more youth housing in particular, making sure that we are thinking about our sexual health in general, not just reproductive health, if he tries and attack those things, you better believe I'm going to fight like a mother for my city. Right? I'm known for being a fighter. I'm very loud, and I like to take names, right? But we also have to maintain a very professional relationship and know how to pick our battles. I think the reality of the matter is we depend on the federal government for a lot of funding when it comes to our infrastructure, including our transportation. But what I think is going to be the big fight, Medicare reimbursements, right? Our hospitals right now are getting only 30 cents to the dollar that they spend. And this is what has led to diminished services or diminished quality of services, even the closure of so many hospitals. We all saw what happened with downtown Brooklyn. And let me tell you, in Queens, over the past 20 years, we have closed 5 hospitals. We are in dire straits. So making sure that we're actually investing in our public health system, especially coming out of the pandemic. I actually thought that was what was going to happen, that we were going to take our hospitals seriously. I would love to make sure that every public hospital has a mental health wing and with the appropriate psychiatric beds, so it's not just Bellevue, because that's unacceptable. There's so many of us. And so for that and a lot more, we're actually going to need federal funding. So keeping a channel of communication with the administration in a very professional way is going to be critical. And hopefully, Donald Trump can find his heart. It's somewhere.
I don't know about that.
It's behind. All right, Assemblywoman Simon says it's behind his soul, which he doesn't have.
I thought it was like a Grinch situation where it was 3 sizes too small.
Oh boy. All right. I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole.
All right, I think we are going to move now into the lightning round. I will pass it over to Seamus.
Yeah. So these are going to be yes, no, or short answer questions. Okay. Mayor Adams attempted to move retired New York City employees to Medicare Advantage program. Would you pledge to stop all further litigation and veto any legislation that would move the city retirees to such a program?
We have to keep our promises to our retirees. And it's because it's out of respect for our elders, but also I come from labor and I got a pension too, and I don't want the promises broken to me or to anybody else. So I am going to make sure that we're taking care of our retirees so that they can have some peace of mind and we're respecting their contributions and their work in this city.
Will you commit to enforcing Local Law 97 of 2019 on its original timeline so the city will meet its emission goals?
Yes, especially if the governor helps me or signs my jobs and housing bill in order to make sure we have the funding necessary. I'm hoping to pass it this session so that we have the funding necessary to help co-ops and other buildings be able to actually comply with that law and a few others.
Are you committed to closing the Rikers Island jail complex by
Yeah.
August? Okay. I was going to ask by the legally deadline, but
I would love to uphold the deadline. Look, if I'm able to be sworn in as mayor on January 1st, 2026, the truth is I don't know if I can keep the deadline, right? Because nothing has been done by this current administration the past 3 years. I mean, we should have had shovels in the ground already with all the talk about the borough jails, but he has done nothing. And in fact, more people are getting hurt or worse, have died at Rikers during his tenure. That is unacceptable. The jail has to close as soon as possible in the most responsible way.
okay. Final question. Which mayoral candidate should I rank on my ballot and in what order?
Oh, I think you should rank everybody except for Eric Adams.
We only get up to 5, so
If you can only get 5, you are definitely not ranking Eric Adams, and especially not someone else if he does decide to jump in the race. I already said his name without giving you guys a heads up, and I apologize because sometimes but I would rank everybody else. Hopefully, you're going to rank me as your
well,
number.
there's more than 5
choice.
candidates. So do you have a particular order?
Not yet. I am still willing to be swayed by my fellow colleagues. So I don't have an exact order yet, but I of course want everybody to rank me as number 1.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Senator.
Thank you for having me, Brooklyn. Thanks for everything you do.
Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Sharon Harkey and Carlos Calzadilla. All right, hello everyone. My name is Carlos. This is Sharon. Before we begin, I actually want to give a quick shout out to the Brooklyn Young Democrats in the House, young people, and all the young people as well, and all the young at heart. Which are many that have more energy than actually most of us young people these days. Thank you all for joining us on a cold, freezing Thursday. We avoided becoming a popsicle, so let's begin. Up next is Zellnor Myrie, who represents Brooklyn's 20th Senatorial District and is the new chair of the Senate Codes Committee. Senator Myrie, please join us. All right, Senator, go ahead and do your intro.
Check, check, check. What's up, Brooklyn? All right. Let me first say thank you to Brooklyn Law School for hosting. It is good to be back here. I've spent many a night here at an IND meeting, so it is good to be in this setting. I also want to thank all of the clubs here because if I'm being honest, I would not be a state senator without many of you in this room. One, any road to City Hall or the governor's mansion or to a United States Senate seat or to any higher office must go through the clubs that are in this room. It is a fact. It is a fact. And back in 2018, y'all did something remarkable that had nothing to do with some of those higher offices. This was the first state legislative session election season post Donald Trump's first election. And before it was popular, before it was cool, y'all stood up and said, wait 1 second. We have Democrats that are caucusing with Republicans, empowering them, preventing legislation that would help people from passing through. And one of those Democrats represents us in the state Senate. You stood up and said, not anymore. You wrote postcards. You got petition signatures. You made phone calls. You handed out flyers. You were out in the cold. And you were able to support me for state Senate so that we could take it back, get the supermajority, and get to the work. So I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause. When we talk about the reasons for some of that support, it's really because I was from the community I was seeking to represent. When we talk about protecting public health and our safety net institutions, it's personal for me. I was born in a safety net hospital in Crown Heights. When we talk about rent stabilization and fighting for tenants, it is personal for me because I grew up in a rent stabilized apartment on Flatbush Avenue. We talk about protecting our immigrant friends and neighbors. I'm the son of 2 Costa Ricans who came here and worked in factories for opportunity. We all fought to get more money into our public schools to finally fund foundation aid. That was personal. I went to PS 161. I went to Brooklyn Tech for high school. All right, Tech in the house. Yeah. My story is not possible without these investments, without these fights. And where we are right now in this city, we are witnessing that opportunity slip away from all of us. I still live in Central Brooklyn. I'm celebrating a little over 1 year of being married. Yes. Actually, today is my wife's birthday, so I'm just going to ask you, just indulge me for a second to wish her a happy birthday so I could play this back to her later tonight. Babe, happy birthday. Okay, thank you. My wife and I want to own a home. We went to the same elementary school. We live a couple of blocks from it now. We want to own a home in that same neighborhood. Feels impossible. We want to expand our family, but the average cost of childcare is $22,000 per kid per year. And instead of having leadership at City Hall that is focused on providing this opportunity, focused on protecting us, we have a City Hall that is distracted, that is silent when we need solutions. And so we need real leadership in this moment. And that is why I'm running for mayor. We need urgency and attention to detail. That's what we did in the state Senate. My very first day on the job, I passed something called early voting. We were the 38th state to get this done. But then, a couple of weeks later, we passed something called the Reproductive Health Act, codified Roe v. Wade along with Assemblymember Simon, codified Roe v. Wade years before the Supreme Court struck it down. A couple of weeks after that, we passed the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, the most forward-looking climate legislation that we have seen. And then we closed the session with the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act, the strongest tenant protections we've seen in half a century. We did all that in our first 6 months. That's the kind of urgency we need at City Hall. That's why I'm running for mayor. And that is why I hope I can earn everyone's support in this room. Thank you.
All right, we're going to begin with the first question on housing. Please describe a specific plan to increase housing supply and protect tenants from eviction, including how you will work with the governor and state legislature to accomplish these goals.
I don't just have an answer or a hypothetical. We have a plan. Rebuild NYC, a mandate for 1 million homes over the next 10 years, the creation of 700,000 units, but also the preservation of another 300,000. I grew up in rent-stabilized apartment. We have to protect the last vestiges of affordability in this city. So it's important that we fully fund right to counsel, that we expand right to counsel to not just protect our renters, but also our homeowners who are facing foreclosure and who are facing deed theft, a law that I fought very hard to pass to finally criminalize. I think it's important that we build housings of all types for all New Yorkers. It is important that we increase the supply, and that doesn't just include 10 and 20-story buildings. We need to allow for the development of smaller opportunities, a real path to homeownership, clearing the bureaucracy, hiring more staff for HPD and DOB, allowing for density to increase in places that are already dense, allowing for potential rezonings in places that can change now. I have a plan to actually strike at the heart of the affordability crisis, rebuild NYC. Check it out on my website, zellnor.nyc.
Thank you. In light of the incoming federal administration's threats, what will you do to protect our immigrant neighbors?
You know, as I mentioned, this is something that's very personal to me because my story is not possible without two immigrants coming and working in a sponge making factory and a linen factory. My dad left the sponge making factory, became a public school teacher, taught special education in the Bronx for 22 years. My mom left the factory. She became a nurse, started a jewelry shop on Flatbush Avenue, small business owner. This is exactly what we see all the time play over and over. But what we have in the current mayor is someone more willing to play footsie with this president than to actually figure out how to protect our neighbors. My understanding is that it was just announced that he is on his way to Mar-a-Lago right now. A man who could not go meet with President Biden because he had to rush back to the city after one of his staff members were being investigated and raided, has decided that he can make his way down to Florida at a time where we need him here the most. So we got to do a couple of things. Sanctuary City has now become sort of a lightning rod phrase, but we forget that this has started back in the Koch administration. And then Sanctuary City was upheld by well-known progressive Rudolph Giuliani and subsequently ratified and improved upon. It used to not be a partisan issue to protect immigrants in this city because we understood that they were the lifeblood. So I will stand up for our Sanctuary City laws, but we also have to hold folks accountable who were stepping over the line. We saw back earlier in 2015 that there were correction officers that were cooperating with ICE against our Sanctuary City laws and were not held accountable for that, not under a Myrie administration. But we also got to be a little innovative here. People come here to work. They come here for opportunity. I proposed something called Work NYC, which was a New York City specific work permit that would allow people to work in the city. Were there some legal questions? And I know the dean is not here. He's a constitutional law professor, so he could probably check me. But were there some legal questions? Sure. I'm a lawyer too. I've read the case law. Was it a slam dunk? No. But it was a shot. And if the federal government wanted to come attack us for trying to put people to work instead of helping us with a national problem, sue us, take us to court. And when this option was presented to City Hall, a New York City specific work permit, Work NYC, their response was, no other city has done this before. So are you kidding me? This is New York City. I'm not gonna wait for anybody else. We're gonna step up and deal with the problem now. So I'd like to see a version of that. I'd be using every tool at our disposal to ensure that we are protecting our neighbors, whether that is by way of our corporation counsel or by way of being in the media capital of the world, where we would not stand for anything that would hurt vulnerable New Yorkers.
Corruption and impunity have long plagued the NYPD. Specifically, how would you reform or constrain the NYPD to promote accountability to the public, discourage the overuse of force, and ensure the department's compliance with the city's local laws?
So it's been disheartening to see headline after headline, week after week, allegations of corruption, of sexual harassment, of misuse of overtime. This reduces faith in our institutions. If you're a regular New Yorker, you're not tuned into politics, you're not reading and breathing this stuff every day, and the people that are supposed to keep you safe are being accused of misusing the public trust, how could you trust anything in government? So we have a really important job to do in restoring faith in our basic institutions. So I would like to see more resources for CCRB, of course, but there has to be a culture change at the top to say we are going to support police officers and law enforcement officials when they are doing the right thing because they are a necessary component to our public safety ecosystem. My mom was robbed at gunpoint when I was 5 years old. Her worldview on public safety is shaped by that experience. She feels safer when she sees more police officers. But her son also was famously pepper sprayed at a protest, falsely arrested. And so I think, like most New Yorkers, she can hold two truths at the same time. That we need our police officers to help keep us safe, but they also need to be held accountable when they step over the line. That's what we would see in a Myrie administration.
Thank you. What can the city do to increase access to reproductive health care, including abortion, and improve maternal health outcomes?
So I think that there are a number of things that we have done on the state level and really under the leadership of some amazing women in the state legislature that I think are going to be important under this administration. We, of course, codified Roe v. Wade, but we have seen recently in the past couple of months, states like Texas going after doctors that are in other states. And we are going to have to, as a city, ensure that we are protecting New York City healthcare professionals who are trying to help people in other states get the access and the allowance for choice that they deserve. But on the maternal health thing, I think it's really important. And this, so we say it all the time in these rooms about our maternity health crisis and what it means for women of color. But we have seen hospitals close and be proposed to close all over this city. It is particularly important to me because the only state hospital in this city, SUNY Downstate, was proposed to be closed last year. And we stood up, we gave them hell, and we said, no way are you going to close a hospital in the middle of a neighborhood where our maternal health crisis is a crisis, leading the city. So I was glad to stand with my colleagues, but we also had some legislative solutions. Assemblymember Simon had a really important bill that said if you are going to close a hospital, there are some steps that you got to take. There's some community engagement you have to go through. There's some transparency that has to be in that process. And the legislature passed it overwhelmingly, only to see it vetoed by our current governor. So I think it's important for us to be supporting these efforts. I think our health and hospitals has a really important role. It's one of the largest public health systems in the country, where we can be doing some innovative things, but we gotta ensure that we're doing everything possible to resource our safety net hospitals, because they oftentimes coincide with the places where our maternal health crisis is the worst.
Assuming continued mayoral control of the New York City public school system, what initiatives would you pursue to improve the quality of education for all public school students in New York City?
Well, I'm the proud son of a public school teacher, as I mentioned earlier this evening. And so my dad often talked to me about a lot of the things that he would like to see changed. One of the smaller things, but that ends up adding up, was teachers having to buy supplies out of their pocket. And not having the resources to do that, but doing it because they love the kids and they were going to make sure that they had everything that they need. There should be no situation where a teacher has to come out of pocket to buy school supplies and to have what they need in front of the classroom. So that is one thing that I would like to see change. But I think it's also important to talk about what happens after school. I am the product of something called the Crown Heights Youth Collective. My mom could not get off at 2:30 p.m. to come pick me up after school. So I spent a lot of time in the Crown Heights Youth Collective. Learned karate, play a little chess. I was the only boy on the step team. Maybe I'll show y'all a little something later on. But it kept me safe too. I was in a place where my mom could have some peace of mind. And we know between the hours of 3 and 6 p.m., that's when our kids are getting involved in things we don't want them to get. So I want universal after school in this city. Every family should have that choice. It's not only relief for working families, but it also is a potent public safety tool. That's something that we would get done in the Myrie administration.
Thanks. What are your plans to improve transportation to enhance safety, accessibility, and quality of the city streets for all New Yorkers?
So I take the subways and buses every day. I do not own a car. I do not drive. There's some people who know me personally who are laughing. So I'm a commuter through and through. I remember the first time that I got on the bus by myself. I got on the B43 on Empire Boulevard. I was in my school uniform. Back then, you had to show the bus pass. Yeah, some of y'all remember. Some of y'all remember. And I was so proud that I was taking the bus by myself. I would find out years later that my mom was driving behind the bus to make sure that I was okay, which I think is just, again, a classic New York City story. So I say that to say that I'm a commuter. But we got to be honest that things feel different on our subways right now. Got to be clear-eyed about that. New Yorkers are suffering before our eyes, and sometimes posing a threat to themselves and to others. But what we're currently doing is not working. We're sending people to the emergency room where they cycle out after a couple of days. And Assemblymember Simon and I have some legislation around this process. Or we're sending them to Rikers, where they get even worse. There has to be a middle ground. There have to be alternatives. We got to build permanent housing so people can get the supports that they need. We have to have teams that are going out and that are present so that people feel safe, but they're also being put on a path to recovery. That's something that I would want to do as the next mayor of this city. But we also have to talk about our buses and our street design. This mayor said he was going to be the bus mayor and has not been that. One of the bus lanes in our district that is coming up for discussion is the B41. Anybody get on the B41 here? Come on now. You ever been stuck on Flatbush losing your mind? We can make it faster. We can make it faster, but we got to have the political courage to do it. And that's something that I would be prioritizing. We have the slowest buses in the nation. It's an embarrassment. We got to do better there. But we also got to think about our cycling network and what we're doing on bike lanes and connectivity and ensuring that we can get around the city in a way that is safe, both for cyclists and for pedestrians. And so I'm looking forward to being the actual public transit mayor. Someone has to fact check me on this, but I'm hoping that I'll be the first mayor to not have owned a car upon entering City Hall. Thank you.
This next question is regarding the convicted felon president-elect. Fitting we're in a law school. If elected mayor, how would you protect the city against a likely hostile federal administration while delivering results for New Yorkers?
I think it's really important, in addition to some of the things that have already been discussed, we got to have good relationships with our members of Congress. They are going to be, in many respects, the front line of protecting us against some of the worst instincts of this next administration. So I really look forward to building strong relationships with the New York delegation so that we can ensure we're speaking from the same sheet of music. I think it's important to protect our current laws on the books, whether that is sanctuary city or other forms of protection for vulnerable New Yorkers. And I also think it's going to require us to be innovative. One of the things that I'm really proud to have passed in the state legislature was the nation's first gun industry accountability law. The nation's first. Many of you helped us get this done. This was a simple principle that if you are a business and your illegal instruments are making their way to our city and our communities in the state and they're harming us, that you can be held accountable in court for this. And people say, well, Z, you can't take on the gun industry. And you certainly can't do it if no other state has done it. I said, that's not our problem. Again, we are New York. We're going to step up and get it done. We passed that law. We were the first in the nation. This was in 2021. Tonight, 8 other states have the same law on the books, following New York's lead. We can do the same thing. We can do the same thing as a city. We can step up. We can be innovative. We can lead. And then hopefully we can have other folks follow us.
Well, I understand we're ready for the lightning round.
Let's go.
Again. Yes or no questions. Mayor Adams attempted to move retired New York City employees to a Medicare Advantage program. I think you may be familiar with this one. Would you pledge to stop all further litigation and veto any legislation that would move city retirees to a Medicare Advantage program?
Yeah, so yes and yes. And let me also say that it's important for us to figure out where we can save on healthcare as a city. But I think that there are some other opportunities for us to do this. This has become more familiar to folks, pharmacy benefit managers who are the middlemen in our drug pipeline who make a lot of money off of being the middlemen. I think that the city should consider being its own PBM so that we can drive down the cost for people to get the much needed medication. And I think that there's some other opportunities for us to do it. I'm the son of a retiree, so I'm sensitive to this issue. And I think that what the city's posture has been wrong.
Will you commit to enforcing Local Law 97 of 2019 on its original timeline so the city can meet its emission goals?
Yes.
Are you committed to closing the Rikers Island jail complex by August 2027, the legally mandated deadline?
I am in full support of the closure of Rikers. I think we are facing some real administrative obstacles to getting it done under that timeline, and I think we have to be honest about that. But I'd be doing everything possible to get it closed on as close to that timeline as possible.
And the final question, the funnest question, which mayoral candidates should I rank on my ballot and in what order? And please tell us every single order.
So I think it's still very early. I will be fighting to be everyone's number one And I'm going to be listening to a lot of voters, including those in this room, over the next couple of weeks and couple of months to figure out what further suggestions we're going to make.
Okay.
Well, give it up.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Myrie. Again, I'm Carlos, the president of Brooklyn Young Democrats, and this is.
I'm Sharon Harkey, president of Central Brooklyn Independent Democrats.
And when I grow up, I hope to be like Sharon. Up next is Zoe from Go BK and Joe from INBK.
Hello, hello.
Our candidate is on Zoom, so we're just waiting for him to be up there. Yeah, we're going to turn our chairs a bit. Oh, good.
Hello, I'm Zoe Gabby, and I'm going to introduce you. So tonight, now we have, joining us now is virtually, is former Obama administration alum and DNC Vice Chair Michael Blake, who from 2015 to 2020 represented the Bronx 79th Assembly District. Assemblyman Blake, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. So will you please take a few moments just to introduce yourself to the audience?
Absolutely. Good evening, everybody. I hope that you are doing incredibly well. Please forgive that I'm not there. This is the 16th birthday of the oldest of our two girls, and they were pretty adamant of that. I wanted to make sure I kept in her good graces first and foremost. We're coming to you first to say thank you for all that you're doing throughout Central Brooklyn, a place that is near and dear to me as someone who is Jamaican myself from the South Bronx. I've spent many times with you. I am running for mayor because we have an opportunity to transform how we focus on cost of living, affordability, and public services. In particular, we need to have universal childcare. It is simply too expensive for what is happening across New York City for our families and the opportunities for those that want to be able to live and thrive within our city. I led the Mitchell-Lama subcommittee when I was in the assembly, and we have to have a focus on middle-class housing to ensure that our families are actually able to have a home and keep a home. What's happening? We know it's a continual concern throughout Central Brooklyn, and it's one that's happening all across our city. We have to think about how do we address what's happening around affordability. And I fundamentally believe that if we have a local median income, not an area median income, which is too broad and too vague, it will allow us to actually make sure that the expenses in our community are connected to our community. We equally have to reimagine what's happening with public services. That means when it comes to public safety, that too often we have officers that we're hoping will address the mental health crisis that's happening in our communities who have not been trained to do so. If we amplify the 988 hotline, as well as ensure that we can end homelessness and end poverty at the same time by utilizing the unused space across our city, that will make sure that we have more people off the streets, but actually in homes in that support. How do we do that? It means we have to reimburse nonprofits faster, because when 66% of nonprofits are providing the services of our city, if you are waiting to get paid, it makes it harder for you to change the game for your communities. For public schools, it should be mandatory for every student to have civics, financial literacy, and mental health before they graduate from high school. And we need to be a city that when you graduate, that you are guaranteed admission into a CUNY and a SUNY if you pursue that. That is how you increase the likelihood of us transforming what's happening in our communities. When we think about public transportation, it is the understanding that, yes, we have to be greater focused on what's happening within our trains, where there is no good reason why our trains are consistently delayed. When you go other places around the world, such as Japan, if you're delayed by a second, you don't get that train. Why is it that we have delays and don't have the safety that we need? You should be able to be safe. You should be able to be on time, and you should be secure when you're riding on our trains as well as our buses. When we think about what's happening collectively throughout our city, we have a chance to transform where we were. For 6 years, I was the assemblyman in New York. I created the My Brother's Keeper program. We led the prompt pay bill, so you were paid faster when you were working in New York State. And it is important when we think about how do we transform what's happening in our communities to address not just the violence, but address the holistic opportunities that exist. I am running because we have to have a mayor who can manage and lead. As a small business owner for the last 12 years, I have led teams and have paid high wages and benefits. As a son of Jamaican immigrants, I am clear about the responsibilities of what we have to do for our communities as well. When I was an Obama aide for 6 years, I was able to make sure that not only we helped implement healthcare, but made sure we paid communities faster. It is important that we have someone that can transform our communities, and that is why I'm running. Our website is blakefornyc.com. We are excited about this opportunity because we have an opportunity to make sure we help the people, not just in Central Brooklyn, but across New York City. Lastly, when we think about what's at stake, when we think about what is coming in just a few days when Donald Trump takes office, I am running because I am the only candidate who can say that I have federal, state, and city experience. And when we think about the attacks that are coming, whether it be on our immigrant communities, whether it be on our seniors, whether it be around jobs, or whether it be around schools, who is the person that can actually say from DC to the State House to City Hall knows to immediately be ready on January 1st, 2026? That is a fundamental reason that makes me stand apart. And I look forward to answering your questions and engaging with you at this time.
Great. Thank you, Assembly Member Blake. My name is Joe Crescione. I'm with Indivisible Brooklyn. I'm also with Central Brooklyn Independent Democrats, as well as Independent Neighbors of Brooklyn. I'm all over. Anyway.
You're like a good Jamaican, man. You got multiple jobs. We like that right there.
This is how I spend retirement. There are probably better ways, but this is what I decided. Anyway, enough about me. We're going to be asking you some questions, Zoe and I. The
Absolutely.
first question's on housing. Please describe a specific plan to increase housing supply and protect tenants from eviction, including how you will work with the governor and state legislature to accomplish these goals.
Absolutely. First and foremost, City of Yes did not go far enough. Not only by the mayor's admission did they not actually build enough units to make sure we address the crisis of lack of supply, they also did not address the affordability of actually making sure you can have a home. What does it matter if someone has a unit, but you can't pay for that? And so when we think about the housing challenge that are existing, which is personal for me, my mama was homeless in Jamaica. We sold dinners in the Bronx to make sure we paid our rent. It is about ensuring that you do multiple things at the same time. First, we can build more housing, and we should. And it has to have environmental qualities, but it also has to have protections when it comes to income so that the working class and the middle class can actually have a chance to keep that home. Too many people are leaving New York City because they don't believe they can afford it. Why? Because we are not changing what is happening around area median income to local median income. Joe, to your question, one of the things we need to do is make sure that we implement local median income so that the rates that are determined on how you have, whether it be an apartment or a mortgage, are making it related to what's happening to your community. That makes much more sense. We have seen similar models in other places around the country, from Stockton to St. Louis. Why won't we see that in Central Brooklyn? Moreover, we have to make sure we are taking changes to eliminate the discriminatory practices that make it hard for someone to get a home. I am on the board of Ready Life. There is no good reason why we're looking at someone's credit score to determine if they can actually get funding so that they can have a security deposit to be able to make sure they get a home. If you have consistently paid your rent on time, someone missing one credit card bill is not indicative of they're a great homeowner. If we created a space for more people to have homes, to keep their homes, and have those opportunities to address that, you can change the game. Lastly, we know right now that fundamentally, we are not developing more opportunities across the city because it has seemed that incentives have not been done so for developers to actually build to the middle and working class. Right now, it is about the responsibilities that are happening where effectively we're only building just to low income. Let me be clear. We have to support our low income residents across New York City, but we need to reimagine what we're doing. And that is why I have said there must be a Mitchell-Lama 2.0. Mitchell-Lama, when done correctly, and I was the chair of this, creates opportunities for middle class and working class residents across central Brooklyn and New York City to get and keep a home. If you created more incentives for that, you can help more people to keep those units. As well, you have to address what's happening with waiting lists. Too often, you are waiting on a waiting list and someone has been jumping you on the waiting list, so you can't actually get what you've been waiting for. I have worked to eliminate that absolutely unfair practice. And if you did all three, you would be able to build more homes, you would have greater affordability, and you would ensure that you can keep the home. That is how you can address the housing situation in a comprehensive manner.
Thank you. In light of the incoming federal administration's threats, what will you do to protect our immigrant neighbors?
Well, as a son of immigrants myself, it's very personal for me. And I've started that and been consistent about that to the question when standing out with the New York Immigration Coalition, when collaborating with groups such as Forward.us to prepare for what is coming. Not only do we have to be concerned about Trump's rhetoric and how it would lead to an aggressive deportation tactic, but there's also the additional consequences from his actions that we have to be concerned about. For example, what happens when that family, that mother, decides to not walk their child to school because they're afraid of an ICE vehicle pulling up to try to take their families away? That will then lead to decreased school attendance, and it will lead to heightened tension within our communities. Practically, what can we do? First, we have to make sure we're collaborating with our legal partners inside and out to be able to respond and be present immediately when these unconstitutional attacks are being laid out. Let's be very clear. Eric Adams has actually stated that he would pursue and support unconstitutional activity on what happens on New Yorkers, which led to groups such as the New York Civil Liberties Union to make it very clear that that is not the path we can go down. Second, how do we ensure that we are in great collaboration with our great Attorney General, of course, out of Brooklyn and Tish James, as well as the district attorneys, as well as lawyers locally in these communities, so that there is increased support for our immigrant families to have the protections that they need, and recognizing it must be in multiple language for great language access. We are not helping our families if everything is only in English. It has to be connected to the communities where people are coming from. Lastly, though, to your question, we also have to track the numbers of where individuals are coming from so we can have comprehensive services to provide the help that they need. Venezuela being the largest community that we've seen demographically. Thereafter, Russia and China have actually been high in that list as well, second and third. And so not only do we need to think about the languages, but we also have to think, what are the nonprofits that can provide the support to have the protection and the comprehensive actual amplification to make sure our immigrant families are helped? At the end of the day, we have someone in Donald Trump who is very clearly communicating that he will do anything to try to deport people rather than empower people. And so you need someone who is a mayor, who has the relationships in the federal dynamics in DC, in Albany, as well as in the city. I am the only person that has all three to be prepared for what is coming so we can be responsive come January 20th.
Thank you. Next question. Corruption and impunity have long plagued the NYPD. Specifically, how would you reform or constrain the NYPD to promote accountability to the public, discourage the overuse of force, and ensure the department's compliance with the city's local laws?
Well, the first thing we need to do if we want to transform NYPD and the culture of corruption is that we need to fire Eric Adams and elect a new mayor. Because when you have someone who has been a 7-year captain in the NYPD, who has turned a blind eye to sexual assault and absolutely egregious overtime, it is not at all acceptable. When you think that there's been 4 NYPD commissioners, as well as, and I heard in the earlier conversation, the absolute lack of accountability that's happening in other places, i.e. that the federal government is looking at a takeover of Rikers Island. If Eric Adams ran under law and order and cannot keep the NYPD, City Hall, nor Rikers in order, then he should not be the one that's next in order to be mayor once again. What can we do? First and foremost, you have to restore trust and leadership and accountability within the NYPD. There is clearly not a level of respect in what is happening. And that means not just in terms of the work and the support that's happening, because NYPD officers want to get home safely, just like I want to get home safely. And so at the end of the day, how do we actually make sure that they are being empowered to do their jobs, which is keeping us safe, as opposed to us asking that they will only address mental health concerns, where we should be providing mental health support within not just our subways and our streets and our communities, so that we are making sure that resources are being utilized correctly. Second, overtime. It is utterly unfair to anyone in Central Brooklyn that you have individuals right now that are racking up overtime in the NYPD when they clearly have not been doing the work for that, but every single person is trying to figure out how they pay their bills around cost of living and affordability. And so when we think about this, there has been a dynamic that has been absolutely unacceptable. As someone who has been the recipient of police brutality twice in my life, including once as an assembly member myself, where the only reason they walked away is that a cop said, get off of him, he is the assembly member. What would have happened if they would not have recognized me? And the reality is, my name and my title should not lead to a level of justice that someone else cannot get. And so you have to restore and have serious leadership in how we are addressing what's happening with NYPD. Collectively, this is about, at the focus of it, managing well. It is a budget that is being unwieldily utilized in unacceptable manners. We should not have the same level of resources going to a strategic resource group, an entity that has regularly gone into communities and created fear and hostility. If you actually take those resources so that you're not arresting a kid for a dime bag, but you're actually helping them have a book bag, that's how you transform a community. And lastly, it is about having a focus in what actually has to happen on our communities. If you have community policing, where individuals are actually connected to the communities, you transform the respect within the communities. What we are not seeing right now is that we are asking individuals to take on jobs that are not actually applicable in our communities. But let's be very clear. Right now, we have a scenario where we have a mayor who has had 4 NYPD commissioners specifically because of corruption, because of lies, and because of mismanagement. You have to have someone who is not only led, but has led a large entity and has the respect of individuals to make sure we can lead effectively. Central Brooklyn, you deserve to have someone that is going to make sure that you are safe getting home, but is also safely managing your money. And that is what I would do if you give me the chance to be your mayor.
Thank you. What can the city do?
I saw the hand claps, but I couldn't hear them, but I'll take the visual hand claps. That's all right.
What can the city do to increase access to reproductive health care, including abortion, and improve maternal health outcomes?
Well, first and foremost, I always say that as a man, I can be a man and a feminist at the same time. And so you have to be someone that is willing to be very clear that when we talk about reproductive justice, it is not just about access to a safe and healthy abortion, which you as a woman should have, full stop, if you so choose. But it is also about the collective responsibility of what happens. I talk about my mom all the time, Hillary Lawrence. She is the matriarch of our family. And she would regularly speak about that Planned Parenthood was the healthcare outlet for her community in St. Anne's, Jamaica. At that same time, it is not just about, are we making sure, which we need to, that women have greater access so you choose to have an abortion, but beyond that, it is about making sure that you have full reproductive justice and health as a woman and as a family. What can we do? First and foremost, we need to make it clear that is enshrined not just in the city charter, but throughout our directives and executive orders, that any woman can have throughout New York City the protections that are happening so you can choose an abortion if you so choose. Let's be very clear. Right now, there is fear. There is fear from a woman to decide what they want to do because of what we're seeing from the rhetoric from Trump and Eric Adams and all those that are aligned that's there. It is unacceptable. It is not right. It is not who we are as New Yorkers. Second, you have to have an ability for greater expansion to mobilize than what's happening on the state side. And when you think about what's happening with Governor Hochul in the legislature, you need someone who is respected to be able to mobilize and say, how do we expand the statutes to create greater protections no matter what is coming here? It is one of the reasons why I have stated that on day one, if you give me the chance to be your mayor, I would issue an executive order around cost of living affordability and public services. And within that has to be public health, so that we understand and clearly state that for every woman that is in New York City and any woman who is making the choice and the decision on where you want to go, that you have the protections of a mayor and a government that will be with you. Lastly, we have allowed this conversation to be directed by Republicans who are trying to make us decide between pro-life and pro-choice. Well, as a reverend, you've probably picked up on my cadence that I've been a preacher for a long time. I am very clear that at the end of the day, it is your choice what you decide. That I understand and underscore that I am pro-choice, but I am pro-woman. That a woman should be the one making a decision on what is happening with your body. That the woman should decide what is best for her family. That a woman shouldn't be told by a man what is best. And at the end of the day, it is about the culture that must be changed within our city. It actually goes back to the previous question about the NYPD. How on earth can we trust that we have a mayor that has allowed people to get paid overtime for sexual activities and assaults, and a president who clearly had sexual assaults that he conducted, when we understand that they do not respect women? I do, and I will be there for you through statutes, through executive orders, and creating a condition where the leaders around me are implementing these protections for you.
Thank you. I hope you can see the applause.
Indeed, I
The
appreciate
next
that.
question is on education. Assuming continued mayoral control of the New York City public school system, what initiatives would you pursue to improve the quality of education for all public school students in New York City?
Well, this is one of those areas that make me uniquely qualified in this race. And you will have a lot of people who will say that they are the best at one thing or another. But I will say that there is no one better when it comes to education at all in this race. First of all, the book Savage Inequality of Children in American Schools by Jonathan Kozol. It was actually written about my elementary school while I was there at PS 79. I'm a PS 79 118 DeWitt Clinton kid. DeWitt Clinton, the largest alumni association of high school in the world. So what's happening within our schools are very personal to me. Expanded beyond that, it is inhumane and unjust that 1 out of 8 students that are going to New York City's public schools are homeless. And we are ignoring that dynamic and that reality, while simultaneously we are not actually making sure that our teachers, our superintendents, and those that are a part of the education system are not only getting the professional development support that you need, but actually giving you time so that not just the students can get mental health support and time away, but you as well. It is the responsibility for us to reimagine education. It is the reason why I have said that I believe it should be mandatory for every student to have civics, financial literacy, and mental health courses before they graduate from high school. If we helped our children to become better global citizens, if we helped our students to make sure they are better when it comes to managing money from the cradle to the career, and if we do not continue to allow the mental health crisis to be done in silence, we will actually be protecting our students in a better manner. Second, we have to transform what is happening when it comes to food in our schools, and specifically the timing of when students are eating. Why on earth would we say to a student that you would have lunch at 10 a.m. or 10:30 a.m. because we are saying we can't find the space? If we actually created more space and find more opportunities where students can actually eat a little bit later, then you are not going into a scenario where a child is hungry and distracted as the days continue on. Moreover, when we think about what's happening within our schools, it is the understanding that right now We are having students that are trying to prepare for a test rather than being cultivated and cultured as students to learn. It is the reason why I led the My Brother's Keeper program, which we are still the only state in the country to have it. It was my initiative in the state assembly where $20 million a year were focused on Black and brown young men to go to school and graduate from school. I would expand the program, which is Young Men's Initiative in New York City, so that we're not just thinking about what's happening through high school, but through college age, because Trump going to a barbershop does not show that he gets it. But Black and brown men not voting for us means that they don't think we get it either. But I would also expand it so we have a young women's program so that our young women can understand and see that we are supportive of them. If we do these things, you will create a scenario where not only do you have greater funding for teachers to not go into their own pocket to have the resources that they need, but you will then be training and developing students for the issues that are happening today. In our day, and I got some gray right here, we would have Schoolhouse Rock. And we don't have that for the kids right now. But yet we're wondering, why aren't they more engaged when it comes to what's happening in the communities of Central Brooklyn and across the city? If we did these things, you would dramatically improve the conditions of what's happening. Lastly, I do believe that you have to show a young person what is the vision that is available for them to transform their lives. And if you graduate in the top 10% of your high school, I do believe that you should have some form of guaranteed scholarship to have a chance to go to schools across New York City. And if you're in the top 10% of those graduating in your middle school, you should have an accelerated opportunity to get into the specialized high schools across our city. I was a kid who was not great with a standardized test. However, I was an excellent student. And my trajectory should not be determined by what I did on just one piece of paper. And so those are the ways we can transform education to make it holistic throughout Central Brooklyn and throughout our New York City students.
Thank you. So we're nearing the end of our time, so we're going to go right to our lightning round. So for these answers, please answer yes, no, or a very abbreviated answer, okay? So the first one is Mayor Adams attempted to move retired New York City employees to a Medicare Advantage program. Would you pledge to stop all further litigation and veto any legislation that would move city retirees to a Medicare Advantage program?
Yes, and as a son of an 1199 SAIU, an emphatic yes.
Thank you. Next question. Will you commit to enforcing Local Law 97 of 2019 on its original timeline so the city can meet its emissions goals?
Yes.
Thank you.
Are you committed to closing the Rikers Island jail complex by August 2027, the legally mandated deadline?
Yes, with the caveat that the local prisons and jails that were being determined actually could be open, because you have to have an ability for someone to go back home.
Great. And the final question, which mayoral candidates should I rank on my ballot and in what order?
You should rank Michael Blake as your first choice. If you have a first choice, Michael Blake should be your second choice. If you have a first or second choice, Michael Blake should be your third choice. If you have a first through a third, Michael Blake should be your fourth choice. And if not, then I would ask to be your fifth choice. And if you go to blake4nyc.com, you will see that I hope to be your first choice no matter what you decide.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, everybody. I hope to earn your endorsement. God bless everyone. And thank you for your understanding. I have a 16-year-old who'll be very happy that you allowed me to do this way.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And happy birthday to her.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Turning over the mic now to Tony Malone and Joe Jordan.
Thank you. Just adjust these chairs here.
Thank you. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Sounds like it works.
I'm a little too angled here
Yeah,
too.
fix your chair.
My goodness. Conversational. Hello, everybody.
Yes, thanks for being here. I'm Tony Malone, president of New Kings Democrats. Thank you.
I'll let you, love the applause. Yeah. I'm Joe Jordan, Jordan, however you want to pronounce it. I'm president of Lambda Independent Democrats of Brooklyn. And also was voted 2024 as most congested bachelor. So excuse me, I'm very nasally today.
Our next candidate is Zohran Mamdani, who was first elected to the New York Assembly in 2020 and represents the 36th Assembly District in Queens. Now I'll turn it over to Zohran for a brief opening statement.
As mayor, every microphone will work in New York City. Pledge that I will uphold. It is an honor and a privilege to be here with you today. My name is Zohran Mamdani. I am the Assembly member for Astoria and Long Island City. And I launched this campaign for mayor about 3 months ago. At that time, the consensus amongst much of the media and political class of our city was that the most pressing crises in the lives of New Yorkers was either that of corruption engulfing City Hall or questions of competence around a mayoral administration. We argued it was in fact something else. It was cost of living to be specific. And when we launched our campaign, we did so with 3 bold proposals to directly tackle that crisis in the lives of working class New Yorkers. The first, by freezing the rent for more than 2 million New Yorkers who live in rent-stabilized housing. The second, transforming the slowest buses in the nation into a model for this country by making them fast and free. And the third, by delivering universal childcare to New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs, whether your child is 6 weeks of age or 5 years of age. A few weeks after the election, we had the presidential. A few weeks after the launch, we had the presidential election, where Donald Trump once again became our president. And we saw that in the entire country, New York had the largest swing towards Trump, 11.5 points. And the places that swing took place were far from the caricature we had been told about Trump voters. In many ways, it was the heart of immigrant New York City. I went to Hillside Avenue in Queens, I went to Fordham Road in the Bronx, and I asked New Yorkers, who did they vote for and why? And I met Democrat after Democrat after Democrat who told me they either didn't vote or they voted for Trump. And they said they did so because they remembered having more money in their pocket 4 years ago. They remembered affording their groceries, their rent, their Con Ed bill, their child care. And while they couldn't afford anything, somehow they saw their federal government affording multiple wars at the same time. And as insincere, ridiculous, and horrific as we know Donald Trump to be, these New Yorkers said his was the campaign that spoke to their desire for an affordable life and a peaceful world. And I asked them, what would it take for you to come back to the Democratic Party, the party that you're currently enrolled in? And they said a relentless focus on an economic agenda. I said, what would you say to a candidate who was running on rent freeze, on fast and free buses, on universal childcare? They said I would vote for that candidate. And I introduced myself as a candidate for mayor. And in the time since then, we have continued with that focus, introducing an additional proposal for a municipal grocery store pilot program, opening up one city-owned grocery store in each borough of New York City, guaranteeing lower prices by taking out profit from that interaction with a New Yorker buying their groceries and passing on the savings of rent and property tax onto those New Yorkers, unlike the corporate supermarket chains like Kroger's, which hide behind inflation to jack up costs even more. And I stand before you as someone who is not looking to make a statement, a splash, or to surprise people, though I know that our campaign has over these last 3 months. I am before you as somebody who is running to win this race. And I am proud to say that in the most recent fundraising filing that just came out, we raised $642,000 from more than 6,500 people, more money than any other candidate in this entire race, from more people than all of the other candidates combined. And we are going to receive more than $2.5 million in matching funds. And I am so excited about bringing this campaign and its message for a more affordable New York City to every single part of the 5 boroughs. And it is so lovely to be here with you tonight in Brooklyn, hopefully to earn your support to be part of that very vision. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. On to the questions. As all the other candidates have been asked thus far, please describe what your housing plan would be, not just how you plan on protecting tenants, but how you plan on increasing the housing supply, which there is a critical shortage of, as everybody here knows, and how you're going to work with the governor and the legislature and city council to accomplish that.
Absolutely. I think any candidate running for mayor has to run with a platform that speaks to all 8.3 million people who call this city their home. And As you pointed out, the policy around a rent freeze, it covers about 2 to 2.5 million. And it's only the first part of our housing platform. We are going to be releasing additional parts. One of them will be about supply and the dire need for us to construct hundreds of thousands of new units of housing across New York City, and also to ensure that those units are truly affordable. Because I represent Steinway and Astoria, and it is difficult to call my constituents and let them know that there's a new affordable housing unit available, when in fact it's not affordable at all. It's just in the name of the program. And I think about the 421A program, which is now 485X, or 485W, they keep changing the numbers and the letters, which in what we've seen historically has cost over $1 million in subsidy for the creation of a unit that's supposedly affordable, but is in fact out of reach for so many. So what we're going to do, and I'll tell you now briefly, but we will be releasing this in detail, is put the city's capital dollars to work to ensure that we are building units for the 2-family household, both of whom are employed in union jobs, but they can't afford a new place to live. For the New Yorkers, more than 100,000 of whom are currently living in shelters and can't find a place to get out of that shelter, or the 4,000 New Yorkers who are living on our subway platforms. We have to build housing for every single kind of New Yorker, and my administration is going to do that, not only by supporting proposals such as City of Yes, which I did, although I was disappointed at the ways in which some of the proposals were scaled back, but also by actively taking a muscular role in the construction of those very units and ensuring that our city government is not just hoping and praying that private developers will fulfill their promises, because I think most people in this room can cite at least one time the developer said one thing and did another.
Thank you for the City of Yes shout out. I think was that the first one tonight?
Thank you. Now on to the topic of immigration. In light of the incoming federal administration's threats, what will you do to protect our immigrant neighbors?
If elected, I would be the first immigrant mayor of New York City. I was born and raised in Uganda in East Africa. I came to this city when I was, are you from Uganda? Are you from Kenya? It's very close. That's amazing. I came here when I was 7 years old. I got my citizenship in 2018. 2 years later, I was elected as the first Ugandan American, the third Muslim to ever serve in the New York State Assembly. There is, however, also a need for more than just representation. We need to have a mayor who is actually willing to stand up and fight for New Yorkers. As I sit here now, we have a mayor en route to Mar-a-Lago, and we know that there is no reason to believe he is going there to try and advocate for New Yorkers who will be in the crosshairs of a federal government that has shown itself intent on destroying the very fabric of this city, no least through the promise to create the single largest deportation force in American history. We know that our mayor is going there to curry favor with our new president in the hopes of securing a pardon. That's what our mayor is going to do. We deserve a mayor who will be on the front lines of this battle and making it clear that we will not sacrifice a single New Yorker in the hopes of gaining favor from Donald Trump. And I say that as someone whose office opened an asylum seeker clinic last year, where we've worked regularly with more than 1,000 asylum seekers, about 90% of whom were single men from Mauritania. And we saw just the ways in which the city has abandoned these New Yorkers, because that's what they are New Yorkers. And the cruelty of these 30 and 60-day shelter rules. We had a client that used to be living in a shelter, and after Adams instituted these rules, we found him sleeping at Steinway Station. And so often when you see New Yorkers in the depths of such despair, we don't always connect the dots as to how they got there. This is the city that put him there. And I think it's time we stop such cruelty. And it's also time that we think about how will we protect these New Yorkers from a federal government. And I want to cite one thing under Bill de Blasio's administration when Trump was first elected. They had instituted ID NYC. They had an incredible amount of sensitive information of undocumented New Yorkers. And out of an abundance of caution, de Blasio's administration shredded the personal documents behind ID NYC to protect those New Yorkers. And right now we have a mayor that I'm worried he's putting together that list to give it to the federal government. We need someone who will actually fight for those immigrants.
So corruption, impunity, lack of transparency, ballooning overtime costs, they've long plagued the NYPD. Specifically, how would you reform or constrain the NYPD to promote accountability to the public, discourage overuse of force, and ensure the department's compliance with the city's local laws?
I would treat the NYPD like every other city agency and department. It's time that we have the same rule for all. Instead, what we have right now is a mayor who's proposing close to $200 million in cuts for pre-K and 3K while talking about the necessity of increasing funding for the NYPD. And this is a department that, as you've said, this predates Eric Adams, but especially under the current mayor, it is a culture of impunity run amok. And as the next mayor of this city, I will disband the Strategic Response Group, which if you have ever protested for your civil rights or anyone's, you have interacted with this group, which has themselves been found guilty of violating New Yorkers' civil rights to the cost of millions of dollars to this city. I will cancel Eric Adams' proposal to build a $225 million new training facility titled Cop City in Queens. I will ensure as well that the NYPD does not need to have an 80+ person communications department. I didn't need to see a 5-minute video shot by drones of how the NYPD invaded Columbia University. We need 1 to 2 people to be able to share the basic facts. And finally, I will put the NYPD under civilian control. Too often in New York City, it feels like the NYPD runs the mayor. And there are real life consequences for this. You know, you mentioned use of force. NYPD's use of force in traffic enforcement, 91% is on Black and Latino New Yorkers. Use of force is up 25% in the last year, including on college campuses. And we've seen people lose their lives. We've seen people be killed because of these decisions. And all of this while we're being told that there's not enough money for libraries, yet the NYPD has an overtime budget of close to $1 billion, which Eric Adams today said it's going to be $900 million for the next year. And you know, some of the things I'm saying, they might sound like a radical departure from Eric Adams. But when he first ran in 2021, he said he would cut the NYPD's overtime budget in half by the end of the first year. He said that New Yorkers don't have to choose between safety and justice. In some ways, I agree with Eric Adams from 2021. I just am running against Eric Adams in 2025 and the record that he actually has.
Thank you. What can the city do to increase access to reproductive health care, including abortion, and improve maternal health outcomes?
So there are a few things that come to mind. The first is New York City has an abortion access program where about, we have more than 10% of calls come from out of state. About 1/3 of calls are Spanish speaking. We need to further invest in that program so that they have all of the resources to deal with what we know is going to be an even larger amount of incoming requests for help. Second, we have Local Law 17, which we need to enforce to ensure that New Yorkers are protected from the lies of crisis pregnancy centers, to make it clear that there is a truth as to these things, and that's what New Yorkers deserve. And we have to be willing to stand up and say it fully and proudly, that a woman's right to choose is never going to be in doubt in this city or in this state. And as this country turns its back on that fundamental right, we have to lead the nation in providing those services for the rest of it and showing Americans that there is a way that they can actually come here and make the decisions that are best for their body. Because right now what we have are women and doctors being put aside so that Republicans can make these kinds of decisions. And there are so many women who have already lost their lives as a result of this, because doctors know that they have no choice but to sit on their hands because they don't want to risk going to jail. And I know that many of us grew up in this country thinking those days were behind us, but they are back once again. And I think New York City deserves to be the place that shows it can be very different. And we can do that by actually investing in the programs we have and standing up and making it very clear that we are not going to accept this kind of a federal administration's demands that we consider women to be second-class citizens. And finally, when you stand up for New Yorkers' values and you stand up for the laws of this city and state, you will undoubtedly face a threat from the Trump administration that we're going to strip you of your federal funding. We cannot allow ourselves to be held hostage by a federal administration like this, and we will have to find the funding within our city and our state, and I'm confident that we can, as opposed to trying to curry favor with the federal government.
Assuming continued mayoral control of the New York City public school system, what initiatives would you pursue to improve the quality of education for all public school students in New York City?
So I have been a critic of mayoral control, and I will seek to end the system as we currently have it, with regards to a mayor acting more as a monarch than one who is elected by New Yorkers to represent them. And I think it's critically important that parents and teachers and even students have more of a voice in determining the way in which our school system is run. There are a number of things beyond that, however, that we need to institute in this city. And I'm really excited to be here with my colleague, Joanne Simon, who has been a big part of the achievements that we've had in Albany, including winning record funding for New York City public schools by finally adhering to the Campaign for Fiscal Equity's lawsuit that they won. And yet, when we delivered that record funding to Eric Adams's New York City, most parents and students didn't feel it because the money was just moved around endlessly. What we need to do is actually ensure that when you get $1 for education, you deliver that $1 for education. And that we adhere to the classroom size bill that we passed in Albany, and we actually create funding as opposed to asking principals to opt into a program. We give funding to every single school to institute that. That we also make sure that every street in front of a school becomes an open street, because we do not need to have parents and children worrying about their safety as they go in and out of school. And we've seen just how desperately unsafe this city can be on our roads and our streets, especially when you have cars gunning down, breaking the speed limit, and knowing that there's nothing that's actually going to hold them accountable. And we've seen what's possible if we actually make these streets more into play streets than the streets that they currently are. Also, I've been really inspired by the pilot program in the Bronx called Every Child and Parent is Known. It's a program that seeks to connect children who live in shelters and their families with someone who works in the public school system. And what we've seen is it requires that public school employee to meet with that child once a day in person, once a week in person with the family. And there are real impacts and benefits to what it does for those kids and those families. We need to scale that up, not just to every school in the Bronx, but to this entire city, to show the kind of attention to the very New Yorkers that we too often view as statistics. And these are some of the things alongside fighting for the very programs that often motivate children to stay in school, which are currently the ones that Eric Adams has put first on the chopping block, whether it be after-school programs or extracurriculars or the social workers that are in these schools that are often helping students stay in class.
Thank you. On to street safety. You mentioned open streets in your last answer, but could you expand on your plans to improve transportation to enhance safety, accessibility, and quality of the city's streets for all New Yorkers?
Absolutely. It's such a great question. I say this as someone who took a city bike to the N, to the 2, to then taking the G, the L, the R, the W, all today. And someone who deeply believes in both the necessity and the importance of public transit in our city and our street safety overall. You know, there are a number of things we need to do. I'm heartened by the NYPD's recent announcement that they are going to discontinue a lot of their high-speed chases, because I've seen one of my own constituents be killed as a result of that, Amanda Cervedio, on 3 blocks away from where I live, killed as the NYPD instituted a chase on a man who was alleged to have committed a burglary. And a New Yorker lost their life as a result of that. I think, one, we need to take the NYPD out of traffic enforcement. It's very hard to ask the person who's double parked to stop other people from being double parked. 2, I think we desperately need to create a protected bike network. You know, I ride on the Crescent Street bike lane, but like most New Yorkers, I don't just live on a north to south axis. I also go east to west. And I need to have protection when I go east to west. And I think it's actually better for everyone when you have protected bike lanes, because I also drive. And let me tell you, it is better when you know exactly where the car is supposed to be and exactly where the cyclist is supposed to be, as opposed to painting a line in the road and saying, you know, you can weave in and out as you so need to. I've talked about making streets in front of schools open streets. I also think we need universal daylighting. I've also lost a constituent to the lack of that. And I, again, want to recognize my colleague here. But fundamentally, I think we need to reshape the way we understand our streets And congestion pricing is an opportunity for us to do so, especially in the central business district of Manhattan. You know, Jeanette Sadiq Khan wrote an op-ed about all the things we could do in this moment. And instead, we have a mayor who doesn't even want to acknowledge that it's happening. You know, we need to create a streetscape that is responsive to the needs of 2025. We have one right now that feels like it's been out of date for decades. And I'm excited to finally build the bike network that we need, not just follow the legal mandates that the mayor has violated every single year, but to build more than that and to ensure that buses that go at an average speed of 8 miles an hour can actually transport the million New Yorkers who ride them in a way that we have not seen before. That we can take the example of Bogota, Colombia, which moves 40,000 people in an hour in bus rapid transit, and build it out across this city. And that's partially why I'm so excited about our pledge to make buses fast and free. Because we're not only going to build bus lanes, we're not only going to build preferential signaling at every single intersection. By making these buses free, we will build on the successes of the pilot program that we won together in Albany. A program that showed in making one route free in each borough, ridership went up by 30%, assaults on bus drivers went down by 38.9%. The majority of new riders earned $28,000 or less. So they were already eligible for fair fares, but only 14% of them had enrolled, which shows the difficulty of asking a working class New Yorker to trust the same bureaucracy that failed them. And the last thing I would say is in this moment of the climate crisis, it's not all new technology and ideas that we need to institute. We have some of the answers. When we made the bus free, 11% of new riders got out of their car, whether the one they were driving or the taxi they were taking, and got onto the bus. Let's do that for every New Yorker. Let's finally make the bus the way people get around and the most reasonable, conventional, and convenient way. And then we can see all of these benefits citywide.
Last question before the lightning round, yes or no's. You've touched on it a couple times already, but if elected mayor, how would you protect the city against a likely hostile federal administration while delivering results for New Yorkers?
I would make it clear that New York values and laws are not up for negotiation. That doesn't mean that I would reflexively say no to each and everything. For example, if Donald Trump, who had run on a promise of making groceries cheaper, wanted to partner on our pilot program to make groceries cheaper, I'd say, great, let's do it together. Let's make these groceries cheaper. But if Donald Trump, as we know him to be, is completely insincere about any of his promises to make life to be more affordable and is instead looking to exploit the despair that many Americans have felt, then I will be clear that I will be standing on the opposite side of him, fighting him on each of those things. And, you know, we're talking about a significant amount of money in city government comes from the federal government. But it's also an amount of money that we could find by taxing the wealthiest New Yorkers and wealthiest institutions that do business in New York. And I think it's important we say that out loud because Donald Trump will beg the question, he will force the question on us. Are you willing to sacrifice women who want to make their own decision when they're meeting with their doctor? Or are you going to find new ways to find the tax revenue that he can withhold from us? And we have to be creative. We have to ensure that we actually understand that what makes this city great is its values, is its traditions, is its laws. And we actually have to uphold them and not spend each and every day on national television talking about how we wish we didn't have a sanctuary city that we actually had to uphold.
Thank you. So now we are at the lightning round. So we're going to ask you to do yes or
Okay.
no or very brief answers to these questions.
You can't give a politician that option.
I know. Extremely brief. Mayor Adams attempted to move retired NYC employees to a Medicare Advantage program. Would you pledge to stop all further litigation and veto any legislation that would move city retirees to a Medicare Advantage program?
Absolutely. We need less profit seeking in our healthcare, not more. And that's what Medicare Advantage is.
Will you commit to enforcing Local Law 97 of 2019 on its original timeline so the city can meet its emissions goals?
Yes.
Great. Are you committed to closing the Rikers Island jail complex by August 2027, the legally mandated deadline?
Absolutely.
And now, which mayoral candidates should I rank on my ballot and in what order? It's an important question.
So, you know, I could say you should vote for ZM and there'd be two options. To be sincere, I have met with all of the other mayoral candidates. And I have told them I have no interest in critiquing them because the only people that I want to critique in this race is disgraced New York executives, be they current or former. And I say that because I believe that I can win this race. And I also believe that by running, I increase the chances of everyone to win this race. Because only 25% of Democrats voted in the 2021 mayoral primary. I want to speak to them and the 75% who stayed home. And when I speak to each and every New Yorker, I'm going to make clear as we get closer to Election Day that there are 5 options on your ballot, and none of them should say Eric Adams or Andrew Cuomo. And as we get closer, to Election Day, I am also interested in slate strategies and cross endorsements and things of that nature, because we saw last time around one candidate engage in that, which is Andrew Yang endorsing Catherine Garcia, and there was a disproportionate number of his voters who voted for her. And it shows the potential in guiding your coalition as to where they could go to fill out their ballot. And I am committed to doing so with other candidates who are seeking to defeat the austerity agenda that we have lived through under Eric Adams and the one that we have already had to live through of Andrew Cuomo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zohran.
Thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure.
And now, Seamus, Allison, and the comptroller.
Hi, it's us again. Hope you didn't miss us too much.
I was joking that I'm going to change my name to Zad Mander to get the Zohran ZM endorsement.
Obviously, our final candidate this evening is Comptroller Brad Lander, who was elected to citywide office in 2021, and before that was a 3-term council member representing the 39th district.
Thank you.
Comptroller Lander? Opening remarks?
Thank you. Yeah, did I miss you? Okay.
Yes.
Good evening to CBID and IND and Lambda and Brooklyn Young Dems and INBK. I am so grateful to be here tonight because when I learned that our current mayor is flying to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Donald friggin' Trump right now, like my head literally almost exploded. I mean, it is not surprising. He's been pleading for a pardon for a long time now and clearly willing to sell out our immigrant neighbors and our city. But still, my head almost exploded. And I thought, you know what? Thank goodness I get to go hang out with the Brooklyn Reform and Progressive clubs. And that was where I want to be because we have been fighting corruption just like this together for a long time. I am so proud to have represented many of you for 15 years at this point. We stood up to corruption in the Brooklyn Democratic Party together. We stood up to corruption and feather bedding and sexual harassment and bid rigging at City Hall. After 2016, we created Get Organized BK, and we stood up to the Trump administration. And we are going to do that again, whether it comes from a corrupt executive like Eric Adams or a corrupt executive like Donald Trump. So thank you for all that work in the past. I'm proud to have been a part of it. I want to be a part of it with you in the future. We've also done a lot of amazing things together, like bring participatory budgeting to New York City, which meant every school classroom got air conditioned after middle schoolers demanded it. We integrated the middle schools of District 15. We made the 7th Avenue subway accessible. We have fought corruption and inefficiency at City Hall and everywhere else. And we have also made some remarkable things happen in our neighborhood. You've heard a lot tonight, and I'm going to talk about it too, about just how badly city government is failing people. City government has to work better for New Yorkers on the things that matter, on housing affordability and tenants getting displaced, and on childcare, and on neighborhood safety in a way that works for everyone. But what I'll say to you is, of all the candidates who are here, I'm the one with a demonstrated record of executive leadership of actually making city government work better for New Yorkers. And that's really why I hope you will support me in this race. For 15 years, I ran affordable housing and community development organizations in this neighborhood, Fifth Avenue Committee. We preserved and created thousands of units of affordable housing, protected tenants by organizing together, helped people get 5,000 people get living wage jobs through Brooklyn Workforce Innovations. In the city council, the legislation that I passed made it so that Uber and Lyft drivers and deliveristas get a living wage. Fast food and retail workers are protected from unfair schedules. Freelancers can't be stiffed out of the wages that you've earned. Each time they said the sky would fall, but it's a great place to be a freelancer, and there's plenty of fast food and food delivery, and literally millions of New Yorkers have billions of dollars in their pocket because of legislation that I passed. As I mentioned, we integrated the middle schools of District 15, passed the Reckless Driver Accountability Act, got congestion pricing implemented, all through work I did when I was in the council. And now in the Comptroller's office, where I've been leading a team of 700 people, Chief Financial Officer and Chief Accountability Officer for New York City. We manage the city's pension funds, $285 billion that are the retirement security of teachers and firefighters and school crossing guards, any municipal employees in the room. All right, thank you for your service. We've earned 10% returns last year that saved $1.8 billion for taxpayers that we can invest in our schools and our parks and public safety. But we've got the best responsible investing program anywhere. Only big public pension fund to have divested fossil fuels. Biggest affordable housing investments in the pension fund's history. We saved the 35,000 rent-stabilized units put at risk when Signature Bank failed. You can do well while doing good. Make sure workers are protected. Affordable housing is a reality, and our portfolio is decarbonizing. So when I am mayor, city government will work better for New Yorkers. Put out a plan on Monday to end street homelessness for people with serious mental illness in New York City. We can do that in the first 2 years of my administration and not be a city where people who are mentally ill are sleeping on the streets of our city. I will focus like a laser beam on affordable housing. That has been my whole career back to Fifth Avenue Committee. I know what we can do to protect tenants better. I know what we can do to get genuinely affordable housing built. I'm the only candidate in the race who doesn't take contributions from real estate developers, but I believe we need to build more housing. We just have to make sure it's genuinely affordable. And at the heart of my plans for housing affordable construction is a next generation of affordable homeownership for working and middle-class families, so young families can see themselves staying in this neighborhood. Obviously, another critical element of that is expanding affordable childcare. We can meet the 3-care promise. We can get every 2-year-old in affordable childcare. We can make sure after school is available for all our kids. But for all of that, city government actually has to work better. And the audits we've done and the programs we've created and the people I've led and the teams I've built will enable us to have a city hall with honest, effective leadership, with great teams of New Yorkers who are showing up for and serving each other. And that's a critical way that we not just stand up for our values, fight Donald Trump, but live up to our values. We need a mayor that's not chasing Donald Trump to Mar-a-Lago, but protecting immigrant neighbors and protecting rights to abortion. But we also need a mayor who's delivering on the basics that make New York City run better. One of the best ways we can stand up for our values is by living up to our values. And that will take somebody with a track record of demonstrated leadership, with a bold commitment to values, and a strong history of partnering with folks just like every one of you in this room. Really grateful for the chance to pitch for your vote tonight. Thank you.
You touched on this a bit during your opening remarks, but if you could, please describe a specific plan to increase housing supply and protect tenants from eviction, including how you will work with the governor and state legislature to accomplish these goals.
Yeah, I'm going to flip the order because protecting tenants, if people know they're going to be protected in their homes, it's a lot easier for people to support some additional development nearby. And there's a lot more we can do. I was proud in the city council to be one of the people that voted for the original right to counsel bill that says you get a lawyer if you're facing eviction. When we passed that, only about 1/3 of tenants had a lawyer in housing court. It got to 2/3 and evictions dropped by 40%. But Eric Adams has abandoned that commitment, and now fewer than half the tenants get the lawyers that they were promised. That saves money. Of course, you have to spend money on the lawyers, but it is so much less expensive than paying for homeless shelters. It's the best thing we can do to protect tenants from eviction. I was also proud in the council to pass a great anti-harassment protection that the Adams administration has totally neglected that applies in some of the neighborhoods around the city facing the most displacement. So I will be leaning in on that anti-harassment protection. And we teamed up in this neighborhood to deal with private equity landlords like Greenbrook Partners, thanks to everybody who helped save the seniors at the Prospect Park residence and some of the other folks who were in Greenbrook buildings. There's more we can do there. So that's what we can do to protect tenants. Once you know you're going to be able to stay in your neighborhood, you have a lot more ability to support housing growth. Look, the Gowanus rezoning, the biggest affordable housing rezoning in the last 20 years in New York City, is also the only one that was supported by the vast majority of its community board, because we organized together with people, protected the tenants in public housing, got the $200 million to renovate Gowanus and Wyckoff, and invested in a lot of the other things that are keeping the neighborhood creative. The first affordable artist studio lottery is up and right now. 4 affordable artist studios in Gowanus. Brooklyn Granary, the city's first grain mill with the bakery run by the head baker from Stone Barns, opening in Gowanus alongside all that affordable housing, because we want a rezoning together that created a lot of housing, created a lot of affordable housing, and invested in the things that people in the neighborhood said they wanted, whether they were public housing residents or artists or folks who love open space. So that's the model. One critical element of my plan, as I mentioned, is affordable home ownership for working families. We've got this great plan called Homes for City Workers. So if you're a teacher or a public hospital nurse or a social worker, we'll match what you can pay for a mortgage. So if you're a teacher who could pay $400,000 for a mortgage, your pension fund will match it with another $400,000. Now you could buy a home for $800,000, and when you sell it a couple years later for $1 million, we'll split the proceeds. You get $500, the pension funds get $500. Doesn't even take subsidy. They do this at universities around the country. We can create the next generation of affordable home ownership here, in addition to deeply affordable housing and protections for tenants.
Thank you. Next question. In light of the incoming federal administration's threats, what will you do to protect our immigrant neighbors?
All right. So, I mean, again, my head is still exploding with what is happening tonight, but we've done a lot of this together. I hope you've seen my office released a dynamite report on the value of immigration in New York City. Look, this city is the greatest immigrant city the world has ever known. And I feel it every day. Like, I am so damn grateful to be a Jewish New Yorker. What this city has meant in safety and protection and opportunity for families, it makes me want to weep. And then it makes me want to fight to make sure that every Venezuelan family that got here, and Ghanaian or Senegalese family or Muslim family, has that same opportunity that my family did. That is what New York City is about. It's why we get the statue in the harbor, and we have to live up to it. So, as mayor, first, I will enforce our sanctuary city laws, and I won't let ICE anywhere near our schools, our homeless shelters, our city facilities. That is the law of New York City. I wrote Mayor Adams a letter detailing all the things he is supposed to be doing, and said, please provide checklists that you are doing these things, letting the receptionists in all those places know. They have not done one of those things. So I will enforce our laws. I'll put my body on the line when necessary. It's a little while since my last civil disobedience arrest, and I don't relish it, but I will help protect our immigrant neighbors, because we aren't going to let this be a city that turns its back on the statue in the harbor. We are not going to.
Well, continuing from your arrests and all that, corruption and impunity have long plagued the NYPD. Specifically, how would you reform and constrain the NYPD to promote accountability to the public, discourage the overuse of force, and ensure the department's compliance with the city's local laws?
So, look, I've said this before, and I'm going to say it here as well, because we got to get this balance right. We can have both fairness and safety, and that's what everybody deserves. It is an important moment to be serious about safety in all kinds of ways. What's happening on the subways, is frightening for people. Most days you get on the subway, you see a person who's unwell, and you think, okay, I know they're not a threat to me. And then you go home on the news that night and see someone someone got pushed on the tracks, and the next day you think, I'm nervous the next morning. So that's why my number one commitment here is to end street homelessness for people with serious mental illness in our city. That's a way we can get a safer city and a more humane one at the same time. On policing specifically, look, police are necessary to respond to violent crimes, to get illegal guns off the street, to solve shootings, but they can't help homeless people get into stable housing or keep kids from skipping school or make sure folks get good jobs. So you need to build the partnerships that make that possible. That's what my plan to end street homelessness looks like. You need to have the accountability system. That's why I was proud with Jumaane Williams to pass the Community Safety Act that ended discriminatory stop and frisk, that created the Office of the NYPD Inspector General, that dealt with use of force. And I will make sure that all of those laws that we passed are enforced, and that I have a commissioner who wants to do both things, who doesn't want to run a protection racket with his twin brother, like Mayor Adams' last, prior police commissioner, but who wants to partner with the community violence interrupters and the mental health organizations to keep the city safe, who wants to support police officers who are showing up every day to risk their safety for ours, and who knows everybody has to be held accountable, whether those are folks who break the law, whether those are police officers, or whether those are politicians who spend billions of dollars on programs that don't work. I will insist on accountability from the mayor through the police commissioner and all the way around.
What can the city do to increase access to reproductive health care, including abortion, and improve maternal health outcomes?
I'm so grateful that you have this question on the list and that you're asking it of every candidate. It happens, I don't always get to travel with Meg Barnett, my wife, but she happens to be with me tonight. Meg was the general counsel at Planned Parenthood of Greater New York for a decade. So this is something that is like deeply important in our family, and in this moment when reproductive freedom and abortion care are so much at risk, New York City has a critical role to play. Some of that is by supporting local providers already doing the work with more resources, so the Bridget Alliance and Planned Parenthood, of course. There's a lot of good options, though, for in many cases, medication abortion and telehealth are safer and more affordable ways for people to access abortion care. And we can make New York City a refuge for the providers who are providing it, and know that you will be safe and protected here. You won't ever be extradited. We've got systems in place to protect privacy. One thing I'm afraid of is that the federal government, so New York Health and Hospitals provides a lot of abortion care. It's about a $4 billion budget. $1 billion of that is federal funding. So if the federal government were to say, as they may well, if you want to keep your $1 billion in funding for H&H, you have to stop providing abortions, we're going to be in a bind, because we're not going to stop providing abortions, but we can't give up $1 billion in H&H funding. But what we can do is build on the Abortion Access Fund and pay for those abortions with city dollars through those local providers, through Planned Parenthood, through the Bridget Alliance, make sure everyone has access to a safe and legal abortion while preserving the funding that H&H gets. So there are this set of models that can do all those things, like protect patient privacy, make sure abortion care is accessible to everyone, make sure providers who provide it here, both on-site in any of those facilities and through telehealth, are protected by New York City. And that will take an investment of resources from New York City, but it'll actually be less than we would lose from the federal government otherwise. And this is one way, don't forget, we're making New York a beacon, making it a place that protects and stands up for immigrants, making it a place where women are fully equal human beings, where reproductive care is accessed. We're going to have people come and live here who want to live in places that are free, where you can thrive and create. It's actually part of continuing to attract the next generation of people who will be the brilliant artists and the great business creators. Like, we have to do this because it's the right thing to do, but it is also a way to keep New York City's economic advantage strong. So this is both the morally right, healthcare strong, and economically sound thing to do.
Assuming continued mayoral control of the New York City public school system, what initiatives would you pursue to improve the quality of education for all public school students in New York City?
So I will flag, I'm a longtime supporter of what we called in the council municipal control, and I would support that as mayor. Mayor's got to be able to choose the chancellor and provide leadership to the school system, but having the council be able to play a role like it does in other areas is the right thing to do, and I would support that. A few things I'll do as mayor. First, the class size law is a tremendous opportunity. Albany passed a law requiring lower class size and providing New York City. Thank you, Assembly Member Simon and other state legislators for getting us more resources. That's such a big opportunity. We did this great study on Brooklyn 305 United, a school merger that took place not too far from here, where an overcrowded school and an undercrowded and declining enrollment school decided to merge because it worked for each of their problems. And they wound up way more integrated with lower class size and with a real energy about the school. So this kind of work, when you're reducing class size, can really be a benefit to helping figure out what's our school going to do. That's now an amazing integrated school. But there are schools that are focused on the ASD Nest program for kids on the autism spectrum, and schools that are focused on kids with dyslexia. And when you reduce class size and help a school figure out kind of what its superpower is, remarkable things can happen. That's the kind of chancellor that I'll be looking for. That means you've got to support your teachers better. The pandemic really was like a gut punch to our support for teachers, but that's where the magic is happening in the classrooms. So I would like to make CUNY free for anyone who commits that they are going to study education and become a New York City public school teacher. So we could signal from, and then I want to have that home ownership program that I mentioned, where you'll be able to double the price of the home you can buy, so that you know if you will come to work teaching kids in New York City. Yeah, we got high expectations. Our kids need a lot. You might be in one of those schools with kids on the autism spectrum or with behavioral challenges or welcoming a bunch of asylum seekers. And we are going to support you because that work, I was thinking about this. We called the cops New York's finest, the firefighters New York's bravest, and the sanitation workers New York's strongest, because we know it's not the sanitation trucks or the fire engines that clean the streets or keep New Yorkers safe. It's the cops and the firefighters and the sanitation workers. But we talk as though the schools educate the kids. So I think I'd like to call my schools plan New York's brightest, and make sure that we really and truly support them.
What are your plans? It's my turn, right?
Yeah.
Okay. It's been a long.
Can we hear it for the moderators, please? They are working hard.
You can tell it's also been a bit of a long night.
No, you guys are doing great.
What are your plans to improve transportation to enhance safety, accessibility, and quality of the city's streets for all New Yorkers?
All right, let me say just a little walk through memory lane, because if you were here when we worked together to get installed and fight to protect the Prospect Park West bike lane, will you raise your hands like we started there? Then we fought to get that 7th Avenue subway elevator to make that station accessible. Then we fought to pass the Reckless Driver Accountability Act after Sammy Cohen-Eckstein and Abigail Blumenstein and Josh Liu were killed. And then we teamed up to finally get congestion pricing passed and implemented when Governor Hochul put it on pause. I convened the coalition that brought the lawsuits that got it taken off pause and put into effect. So that's the work I've done in the past to try to make sure we have safe streets, and we are investing in transit in partnership with so many people in the room. And I'll make sure we do the next generation of that as well. Congestion pricing is a huge opportunity because we can do more things like the 34th Street busway. But one commitment I'm going to make is I'm going to do for every pedestrianization or bus or bike project in the congestion zone, I will do at least one in the outer boroughs. So 34th Street will be paired with Fordham Road in the Bronx, and we will keep making sure we build out the bus and bike lane infrastructure. The Adams administration has been doing a terrible job on the Reckless Driver Accountability Act. They let let it totally lapse with nothing in its place. And I've been talking to Senator Gunardis and some others in Albany about how we could strengthen it so that if you're one of the 1% most reckless speeders, you could have to have a speed delimiter installed in your car so you can't use your car like a weapon aimed at your neighbors. And finally, I will make sure, using the seats that the mayor has as appointees on the MTA board, that we get those investments in subway signal modernization, in station accessibility, in platform barriers and new station gates, and in some imaginative new projects as well. I do think the IBX, if we can get it right and think about what we do on the land around it, as well as the investment in it, can fire the imagination for next generation. One last idea here is there's links we can make, even just with PATH. You know, all we have to do is make a deal with PATH, and your Metro card could get you to Newark Airport on a one-seat ride on infrastructure that already exists. There is a lot we can do if we think imaginatively, both about transit and about safe streets.
All right, in our remaining couple of minutes, we're going to do the lightning round.
Lightning round.
So, yes or no?
Yes. Oh, wait, sorry.
Would you pledge to stop all further litigation and veto any legislation that would move city retirees to a Medicare Advantage plan?
Yes, I was proud to reject that contract when it came to the controller's office, and I will drop the litigation and make sure our retirees have the health care they were promised.
Will you commit to enforcing Local Law 97 on its original timeline so the city can meet its emission goals?
Yes, proud co-sponsor, definitely will enforce.
Are you committed to closing the Rikers Island jail complex by August 2027, the legally mandated deadline?
Deeply committed, but I'm not going to lie to you. It's not going to be done by 2027, and I don't want to pretend it is. I helped pass the law. I marched for it. I will get it closed in my time as mayor, but even the first building, the Brooklyn jail, isn't going to be completed until 2029, and the others 2031, and there's more work needed. So I will get Rikers Island closed. I am deeply committed to it, but I will also tell you the truth about what the timelines can be.
All right.
We also need more therapeutic beds. It is absolutely true.
Last.
It's in my plan, even that I put out. It really is 1,500 of them.
All right. Last question. Which mayoral candidate should I rank on my ballot, and in what order?
I already told you I'm going to have to change my name to Zadmander so you can know. Look, I want to say this, we have to get this right, because if Maya Wiley and Catherine Garcia had cross-ranked each other, had just cross-endorsed each other, one of them would be mayor right now, and our mayor would not be flying to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Donald fucking Trump. So I promise you, I mean, obviously, I think you should rank me first. And obviously, I think you should not rank Eric Adams or Andrew Cuomo anywhere on your ballot. But I also promise you that I will participate in cross-ranking or cross-endorsement or a model that makes sure we get a mayor who is neither of those two. We get somebody who will run City Hall better. And you have my word on that. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was fun. I really appreciate it. Thanks for sticking around, everyone. I know this was a long, late night, so thank you for staying.
Okay, as everyone's saying, of course, would like to say a special thanks to all the clubs that helped with this evening. Brooklyn Young Dems, BKForge, Central Brooklyn Independent Democrats, Independent Neighborhood Democrats, New Kings Democrats, Indivisible Brooklyn, Go BK by Day, Lambda Independent Democrats, and as I'm sure most of you know, most, if not all of these clubs will be endorsing. So make sure to be on the lookout for what they're up to. Of course, let's give a huge shout out to the staff at Brooklyn Law School. Big shout out to Tony and Chris for helping manage the live stream. And big shout out to all of you for being so civically engaged. We hope that you can come join us on February 6th. We'll be back here for our Public Advocate and Comptroller Forum. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.